All right. So I guess I'll open up with a little recap of what I just finished. Gotta crack my seltzer so I don't get a scratchy voice. Gotta stay hydrated. All right, so yeah, last time I basically just got a Create React app project built up, and it was pretty bare bones, just React, and I installed a bunch of dependencies to add in there, mainly around Redux and supporting Redux stuff. And so here's the app as it is right now. It just says hello world, which is great. And so I guess I'm just going to talk a little bit about the stuff that I put in place. So there's this Redux thing is basically a state management library, and there's a bunch of boilerplate that I kind of have to get through each time I set it up. So the main idea here is that we're generating, I guess I'll show configure store. We're generating these stores, which are basically just a tree of state data, with some monitors in place, so that when things go to change the store, we can react or log what those changes are. So that's what the middlewares are for. But we also want to have two separate versions. There's one for production and one for development. Right now, the difference here is that I am using no DevTools add-ons in the production one, so I stripped that stuff out. And in the dev version, I've got this Redux DevTools piece, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second, once we get into doing stuff that the DevTools can actually help us with. And then, so that's the store. Basically, each of these scripts, prod and dev, they return a function called configure store that receives an initial state, which that should be passed in somewhere. So this is wrong right off the bat. Okay, yeah. Initial state is the second argument to create store. So let's go ahead and fix that. Oops. Because that would be embarrassing. I'm gonna mess with my windows a little bit there. Okay. So yeah. Prod and dev. Now the enhancer that I'm importing from this other script is something called thunk, which basically, when I start talking about actions, it just means that when I submit an action, it can be a function instead of a concrete object. And so these functions, you can use them to chain together a set of actions using promises. And I usually throw it in there because more often than not, I come up with a use case for it. But it may not be necessary for whatever you're working on. And so, yeah, I guess that's the store part. The store is something that we need to, it's not the index I was expecting. Is that really it? Yeah, I guess it is. So yeah, up here in the app. So when I import from configure store here, it's going to basically return me the function appropriate for my run environment. So we're in dev mode here, so it's going to get me the dev configure store implementation. And so we just call that thing here, get the store, which is the return, and we pass it into this thing called a provider, which is coming from React Redux, which is like a binding library. So Redux is the state management thing. It's actually entirely separate from React. And then React Redux kind of pairs the two together. Yeah. I also have this initial state, which is just an object. And like the comments say here, this object serves as an initialization for the store. So we can basically set, like, establish data types for the different fields that are going to be in here. And we can also kind of at a glance see what the whole layout of the object is like by looking at this. We can also use it while we're building reducers to grab the defaults out of. So I'll show that in a sec, I guess. So I'm gonna import initial state. So we're going to use that a little bit. Yeah, and I guess ESLint is kicking in, telling me about my unused vars and that kind of thing. So we'll be relying on that output as I work through. So that's all the boilerplate that I had to put in there. I've got the enhancer, adding thunk. I've got the branching implementation for configure store. Oh, I should say that you may be tempted to use regular imports when you're setting something like this up, but you actually need to use the require function instead of like an ES6 import like these, because imports are done like at a different time. This is like a runtime, or well, I guess the transpile is handled differently. Only one of these is going to execute based on this branch, and that's kind of like a compile time thing. So this is gonna, by using require instead of import, we're making sure that we're only bringing in like a one version. Yeah. So today I'm gonna kind of get into setting things up with actions and reducers. I think we're done with app for right now. We're going to be spending a lot of time in the actions file. So I'm going to split this up. And what else? Reducers. Yeah, I need all three of these. Okay, so like I was saying yesterday, I've got a set of endpoints on the server that that correspond to database tables, and so the Redux store is going to kind of act as a local cache of all of that database data. And so I'm going to basically set up a key for each of those tables. So I've got what? I've got zones, collectibles, I've got membership. And membership is going to be kind of interesting. Yeah. All right. What else do I have? Categories. Okay, and so with a Redux implementation, I'm basically setting up each of these keys I will need a corresponding reducer for. And so the names of the reducers don't need to match up, but it's kind of convenient if they do. So I can take these, and I'm just gonna quickly define a function for each one. And then what else? I'm going to take these and paste them in here. And so this is using ES6's kind of enhanced object literal notation, where if I have a single value, it's basically going to assume that I mean a key and a value that are the same thing. So that's the equivalent there. And I could, like I was saying, like I could name this function something entirely different, and then make sure that zones equals, you know, something else like that. But unnecessary. That's good if you have a refactor situation, I guess. So you can decouple the function name from the reducer name. So, yeah. So before I go any further, I guess I will I'm going to pull up example of a Redux reducer, and I'm going to so this is the signature that we're going to use time and time again. So there's a state parameter which defaults to initial state, and there's an action, and the action is usually going to be like a bare object literal, so just a JavaScript object, and the convention is to have a field on the object called type, which you would then do a switch on and kind of decide how to handle the incoming data. But the rule about reducers is the transformation that it does on the incoming parameters needs to be deterministic, and it needs to be non-side affecting, and I'm a little loose on that. I don't know. More often than not, I find this to be a really convenient spot in the code base to do like passive caching. So I think an example in one of the apps we have in production at work, when data comes in through the reducer, I might say for a set of filters for a page, I might passively cache whatever the new filter value is, into a cookie or something like that, so that the filters persisted. If the person navigates away from the page and they come back, we can restore whatever the filter was when they come back. But generally speaking, that's a no-no. You're meant to do those kinds of things in your action creators, but this is the general layout. You decide how to transform the incoming data, and if there's no transformation to make, then you return the incoming data untouched. It's also kind of a good idea to think about object identity. So if you're doing a transformation that results in an entirely new object that is fundamentally the same as the original object, you should go out of your way to return the original object so that the IDs match up. So that if you were to compare the object with the triple equals against itself, it's still going to be equal. There's a de-emphasis on that when you're using immutable JS, which I will be, but something to think about. Object identity can matter. So yeah, I guess I'll start with the default state for each one, and I'm just going to pull from the corresponding key. Yep, I guess that's good. And so for a default, I guess I can do it for all four of these. A default might be to just return the state as is, since we don't have any actions defined yet. All right. And so now I'm going to think about the initial values a little bit. So the way this is going to work is most of these objects will relate to each other via the primary key on the row. And so what I would really like to do is to have each of these different sets of data, quote unquote, indexed by ID. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to build like an immutable map for each of these using immutable JS. So and so for zones and collectibles and categories, the default will be just an empty map. And so further down the line, I'll be able to do like zones.get and then a primary key value, and that should fetch whatever the corresponding zone is. That's how I'm going to use it. Now, memberships is going to be a little different. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to default that to an object. And the reason for that, right, what I can do is I can map out the whole thing. So the data, if you remember, oh, interesting. These are pairs of zone ID and collectible ID. And I don't know why. I feel like this is... I hope there's nothing wrong with this data set, because I feel like there's not enough pairs in here. But we'll see. I haven't tried to visualize the data at all, so we may need to massage things. But we'll find out. So yeah, because I have pairs of IDs, what I'd like to do is to basically generate two maps. One will be, you know, items per zone, and then the other will be a list of zones by item. And I only have a vague idea of what I'm building for the UI on this, but so for the most part, we're going to be concerned with what items belong in a given zone, and that's kind of how I plan to drive things. But I also felt like I was going to maybe do a full list of all the items, and have like a thing that could recommend what section of the game I should go to cross it off my list. That might not ever happen. So and so this would also be a map. Items by zone is going to be the big one. And then what I'll also do is, yeah. Yeah, I guess I'll just stash the raw payload straight in there. I don't think I'll be updating any of this data over time. So once I fetch it from the database, it's going to be pretty static there. But I feel like I want to hold on to this for debuggability if I'm going to investigate, you know, how things are looking. But anyway, yeah, this is going to be the primary point of entry for membership. All right. So, so let's see. So the app should be running on localhost 3000. So there's my hello world. And so all of that work that I did around the store enhancers and all of that, composing middlewares, that all makes it so that I can use the Redux dev tools that are installed in my browser. And so let's see. That's not the side that I was expecting. Can I switch sides? Yes. There we go. And so this Redux dev tool thing is like a state inspector. And so normally what will happen is you'll see actions logged here. And actions are the way that we basically update this data at runtime. So components can submit an action via this dispatch method. You dispatch an action, the store receives the action, feeds it to the reducers, and then the reducers figure out how to handle the data you're sending it. And that state object that we're returning from the reducer corresponds to one of these keys. And so we're either updating the value of the key or not. Yep, and so right now we're just sending in exactly what we are sending out, what we get in. And so in order to make changes to the store, we need to work out some action types and then build some action creators. And so I guess I'll leave the comments there. So thinking about the broad strokes, I know that I'm going to want to be able to fetch each of these different data types. And once I make a request to fetch the data, I will want to know when the data has been fetched, when the requests are over. I will want to toggle the state of a given item's collected field, which will require a remote call. So I'll probably want a requested and then completed action for that. The completed could finish any couple of different ways, right? So we could have a network failure, we could have a network success, we could have some other kind of problem. So these are all the sorts of events that we would want to model out as actions. So so I guess I'll get started here with category fetch. Success and fail. Yep, okay. Oops. And so for all of these, I need 4 sets. Yeah. Okay, and so that's a whole bunch of stuff, but these are just basically we're registering signal names that our application will be able to pass around and listen to. Checking my tweets. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, so as far as action creators go, so basically what I'm going to do for this is we're going to have a function, and let's see. So category fetch success fail. So these are the things that we would want to be able to dispatch. Fetch categories, and generally speaking, you can construct these functions any way you like. For action creators, I tend to use arrow functions. Since the main thing I'm doing here is just constructing an object literal to return it, except for in the case where, I don't know, I'm doing an async action, something with a thunk, which actually, yeah, actually I think that might be what I'm doing here. Well, I'll start these off. Fetch categories. Oops, no. So here's how we might model this out. So with an async action, you're basically going to return a function that receives a dispatch as a parameter. Let me see if I have the thunk documentation here. So I can show kind of an example. The examples I remember being kind of convoluted, but so these actions return promises, and that's why you're able to call promise all on them. Yeah, okay, so we're returning a function that receives dispatch, which then calls something that returns a promise, and then once the promise is resolved, it's dispatching new actions. Yeah. Do we have the promise work in here? Okay, yeah, this is the fetch call. So let's see how this goes. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to return function that takes dispatch. And then I'm going to fetch inside of here using the now built-in nicer XHR API, right? So we'll try API categories. And so with this, I have the opportunity to kind of branch my logic based on what happened. And so in the error case, I could construct an action manually. So type is going to be action types. What did I call this? Category fetch fail. And I can also pass an arbitrary piece of data, which I will send as a reason. And so I'll pass the error along. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Otherwise, what? Then, so the return from the success path will get patched into this then after the fact. In which case I can dispatch a type fetch success. And there won't be a reason. There will be categories. Actually, I'll call it data, just to line up there. How am I doing for line length? Not great. 92. 89. I wonder if I can line break there like that. Probably. Probably legal. We'll see. This doesn't look like it's mad at all. In fact, I haven't seen it do anything lately. Maybe I just didn't notice. It's a lot of windows. Yeah, one of the things that I don't like about React Create app is the fact that it's set up to always open your app in a new tab every time you rerun the dev server, which is kind of obnoxious. So okay, with this in place, we've got a fetch categories action creator, and it looks like I actually don't need these at all. What I thought originally was that I would have a one-to-one. I would have an action creator for each action. And so you would like dispatch zone fetch, which would then in turn trigger some other dispatches. But really, I just need to know the success of the failure. So that'll cut down my actions quite a bit. Because I'll be able to map both of those into a single action creator, and that seems fair. Yeah. So with that set up, the next thing I need is to start looking for these action types over here. So I'm gonna bring in action types from actions. Why the double quotes? So we're going to switch on action.type. And the default case is going to be to return state as is. But then we can also compare the type to action types dot action types categories fetch success and fail. And so in the case of fail, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to return, I need my immutable JS. If I'm going to keep my data types straight. So in the case of a fail, I'm going to return an empty map. Because I didn't get any new data, and if I was looking to fetch, I don't know. I feel like the failure state should be to empty out the data, even if we have stuff on hand. That may not be correct for whatever your overall application flow is like. Oh, hey Manny, I didn't see you come in there. What do you use to make HTTP requests? Yeah, so this time I'm using fetch, and I'm still not sure if it's going to work for OBS. I don't know how new the WebKit support is for an OBS overlay, but I'm going to start with fetch, and then I'm going to replace that with something else if I need to. But fetch certainly works in the latest Chrome, so I thought I'd give it a shot. Right, so I think what I had said was for the success case, I was going to bind the JSON array to data on action data, and so in order to build my map, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to basically generate pairs for my keys and values. So for every item in the array, I'm going to take the ID field and pair it up with the entire object itself. And that is what I can pass to map. Theoretically. So you get that? So that's taking a straight array of objects. Each object has an ID and other fields. We're generating pairs. So this is an array. And the overall result is an array of pairs passed a map, and so this converts it into something where I can ask it for a particular category by its ID. So, and that's basically how almost all of these reducers are going to work. Yeah. So I'm going to do the same exact thing, but instead of categories here, it's singular, isn't it? Yeah, category fetch. I think I'm going to pluralize these. I'm feeling like plural is the one that I want. So and then the update, collectible update, will be singular because we're only ever operating on a single row. All right, plural it is. So, with that said, collectibles fetch success and fail. Oh, and yeah, so the other thing to note is that each branch in the switch is returning, and that's important because we don't want to like create flows within our switch probably, but I think the important thing is to remember that you're returning each time. Because if you forget to return, then you're going to be assigning like nothing to your store in certain situations, which is probably not what you want. I can't. Yeah, I can't decide. Membership is going to be single because these are groupings. Get it straight, Owen. Okay. So membership is a little bit different. It's one of the more distinct reducers that we need to deal with here. Sorry, I'm getting all stiff. So let's see. I'm gonna rewrite this one real quick. So the data that we're going to get from membership is going to be a set of objects that have a zone ID and collectible ID. And so that's what we're receiving in this one in terms of data. And if I look at my initial state, you'll remember that I've broken it up into 3 sections. So I've got raw, items by zone, and zones by item. And I may not use all of this, but this is the plan, at least. So we got to turn this into this. And so, yeah, I guess we'll just build it. We'll return a new object. And I'm not going to be so paranoid about maintaining object identity like I was talking about earlier, because this table isn't going to change. This is static data, and we're probably going to fetch it one time when the app starts. And so this should be mostly safe. And so actually, this is exactly what I would want to return in the failure case. Empty data. And then in the success case, so let's see. I could build an immutable list of action data, and I will frequently get this wrong, but we'll see if this works. So this should be an array that looks like this, and then from here I should be able to do group bys, and then transform the values, I think. Yeah, we'll see. And raw will be just action data. Items by zone. So let's give this a shot. We've got a list, and I want to group by. And so each item has x.zone ID. And then I also want a map, because I want to transform each of my values into, I don't know what the data type is for this, or if it's keys and values, or how this works. So we'll have to debug this a little bit. But the idea is I want just a straight up list of IDs for the values here. So I wonder, so for each V and VS, we're doing collectible ID. So I'm just going to check the line looks pretty long here, 97. So I'm going to break that out by zone, and I can line break a little bit. Yeah, because this is probably wrong and will need to be reworked anyway. And then similarly, by item, would be the same thing, but collectible ID is what we're grouping by instead of zone ID. Sort of like that. All right. So empty. Actually, instead of doing this, since that matches the initial state for membership, I could basically use that to say, okay, we're resetting. So initial state, membership, and if something were to mutate initial state after the fact for an unknown reason, I guess shame on me for letting that happen in the first place. It's possible. It's a regular JavaScript object, so someone could get in there and mess with the values at runtime, but All right. So we've done a lot of plumbing, but as of yet, there's nothing actually triggering any of this stuff. Right? I would need to basically duplicate this for each endpoint. It's a lot of duplication here. And we could simplify this all with some, you know, meta-programming-ish type work. But we'll see. So there's collectibles. And just slide this out a little bit. Fetch membership, singular. And I just, I spotted the typo there. With these guys, I didn't update these. All right, and here's zones. And so, because I've got all of these, oh, you know what? I need to make a slight change here. But it's not terrible. So what I was going to say is I want to do all 4 of these fetches when the app is bootstrapping. And because these are all async actions that return, I would need to return a promise. So I need a return here. I should be able to add one action or one function that essentially dispatches all of them. That'll work, right? I think so. What I can't remember is whether or not you dispatch around the individual action creators or if you just call them or what. I think you dispatch around them. Just like this. So I would dispatch fetch categories, which would dispatch these other ones. But in order to do this, this is kind of what I was saying, I'm going to have to refactor. I'm going to have to lift these out as their own functions so that I can refer to them. Because right now these are all kind of bound or in the process of being bound to this object. And so I would need to do something slightly different here. So oops. Yeah, I know. This is all, it's all bad. I get it, IntelliJ. So I'm going to search for these arrow functions. We're going to turn these into plain functions. Yeah, okay. That went all right. Did I get them all? Yep. And so now I can rebind these to the object. No name transformation or anything like that. Just bundle them up. Into an object that I can pass around. And so now I can build this action creator, which is like fetch all data. Fetch all data. Which returns a function, right, which can return promise.all. And so promise.all can take an array. Is it always an array? I guess it is. An array of all this stuff. I guess that's how that goes. So I'm going to throw fetch all data up top there. And what I'd like to do now is to basically call this as part of one of our components, right? So in my app, component did mount. Do I want to do it this way? So this is kind of bare bones. I can dispatch directly from the store instance. So if I import action creators from actions, it's nice, but I like the single quotes, guy. Come on. Yeah, so I can try it like that. Oh, what is the compiler telling me here? It's telling me that on line 9 I've got an import after an assignment. Import in body of module. Okay, that's interesting and totally fair. Like I would normally do that anyway, but all right. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff happening here that I missed because this was under my IDE, but we'll talk about it a little bit. I guess I can't, can I zoom in on this a little bit? So we'll look at Well, look at this. So my application, my app component is basically the entire page, right? I have just this one component that wraps a div in a provider, and the provider is a thing that kind of creates an implicit scope around its children that allows individual child components to subscribe to store changes. We haven't done any of that yet, but it's there. And so when the app component gets inserted into the DOM of the page, when it gets rendered, it'll basically kick off this action creator, fetch all data, which then does all of this async stuff theoretically in parallel. We're going to check the network tab on my browser in a second to see if that's true. So it'll kick these all off, and then each of those, they do their little dance where they make a request to the back end, and if it's good, then they kind of return a JSON payload, which then gets passed along to the second chunk, which dispatches a concrete action here, just an object literal, with a type and a data payload. And if it doesn't work, and I'm not going to go out of my way to test the failure cases a whole lot, then we should get this action fail and a reason. And I'm not doing anything with it. What I should do at a minimum is log it out somehow. And I don't have any logging apparatus with me per se, so I'm just gonna do it like this, I guess. So I'll add that to each of these error cases. Let's see if I can just move. No, that's bad. Oops. So each one of these should log out its own problems. I'm going to go ahead and drop a semicolon on the end of all those. Okay. So first of all, I'll look at the actions here. So this list here is a running log of actions that are dispatched, and so this is where the application started. This is showing us basically the state according to the initial state, right? Because we haven't dispatched anything yet, so this is all empty stuff. And so as we start to see the successes flow in, we see that the values appear. So we got categories populated, we got membership populated, and this is we can start to see if my data messing around was correct or not. I see that we've got 2 maps populated, and I guess I can spot check the a little bit here. So zones by item, right? So zone 11, 12, 13 should all have a 33 in them. Do I really want to check this? There's a 33. There's a 33. There's a 33. 14 should not have a 33 in there. Okay. Well, I'm not going to check this exhaustively. It may become apparent once we start, you know, rendering stuff in the UI that something's wrong here, but mainly the thing I was worried about is that there would be empty gaps, or that items might not be represented at all. And I think that's the case. I need to look at the length of this, because I mean, we've got 48 items and only a handful are showing up here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That is not good. We need 48, and we don't have them. So I got to figure out where that broke down. And that'll mean going back to the GameFAQs article and seeing maybe there just is a vague section. Maybe it went a little freeform, didn't conform to my parsing, and I just didn't notice until now. Anyway, so that's it. We send one action that kicks off 4 others, and we get either success or fail results. The failures are just going to log to the console, which is fine for right now. And so the other thing I wanted to check was I wanted to look at the timeline here to see if these things were happening in parallel or not. And I mean, it looks mostly like yes. Yeah, I think so. These all seem like they're happening at the same time. And they're all, you know, ballpark 300 milliseconds. They're all pretty small payloads. Again, I probably could have done this entire thing without a SQLite database or a backend to manage that. I probably could have written the whole thing to local storage or even to a cookie, but I wanted something that felt a little more persistent, so I also wanted to write more Rust, and this was a good excuse to kind of do that. So great. I guess that covers a lot of what I wanted to talk about today. We wired up the actions, we got data fetching happening. We have one other action to build, and that is the action that will take a collectible and toggle the collected field on it, update the database, and then update the record in the store here. But I don't want to get into building that until I have more of the UI built. So I think I'm gonna leave it here for now. I'm gonna sign off and take a break and do something else for a little bit. And depending on how I'm feeling, I may be back on later. I may get right back in here because yeah, because this will go quickly now that things are wired up. Nothing really holding me back. Oh, look at that. So yeah, I don't know. Definitely gonna have to look into this membership table. Because otherwise, yikes. Definitely seems like there's stuff missing. But with any SQL project, you gotta take steps to verify your queries and verify your data. So nothing new there. All right, well, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining the stream. It's always good to have people along for the ride. And yeah, I'll be back on maybe after the sun gets out of my eyes. Yeah. All right. Take care.